The warning. Ambassador Vexthor's membranes flickered with anxiety as he entered the grand chamber of the Kraxan Empire. The massive crystalline hall, normally impressive with its towering spires and floating platforms, felt oppressive today. He had to make them listen. 50 Kraxan high commanders sat in their elevated positions, their chitinous forms gleaming under the purple light of their binary stars. Supreme Commander Zixtal's voice boomed across the chamber. Why does the collective send their most senior diplomat for what should be a simple military briefing? Vexthor stepped forward, his four hearts beating rapidly. Supreme Commander, I come with urgent counsel regarding your planned expansion into human space. A ripple of clicking mandibles, their equivalent of dismissive laughter, echoed through the chamber. The humans are a young species, Zixtal declared. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. They have yet to develop quantum shielding or psychic weaponry. Technology isn't everything, Vexthor responded, his voice steady despite his fear. I speak from experience. 300 cycles ago, my people made the same mistake you're contemplating. The chamber grew quiet. The collective's devastating war with humanity wasn't common knowledge, but the Kraxan leadership had clearance to know its broad strokes. We thought as you did, Vexthor continued. We saw their wooden ships, their basic fusion drives, their limited neural networks. We calculated a swift victory, but we didn't understand something fundamental about their species. He activated a holographic display, showing images from human historical archives. Humans have a unique relationship with their young. Unlike our species, where offspring are numerous and naturally expendable, humans invest extraordinary resources in each child. They build entire societal structures around protecting them. Their neural patterns show extreme responses to threats against their young. Supreme Commander Zixtal leaned forward. You suggest we avoid their colony worlds. I implore you to avoid this war entirely, Vexthor replied. But if you proceed, understand this. The moment you threaten their children, you will face something beyond conventional warfare. You will awaken what they call protective instinct, but that phrase doesn't capture its true horror. He displayed another hologram, this one showing the ruins of his people's once mighty military installation on Proxima VI. This was our strongest fortress world. When our forces took human children as hostages, thinking it would force a surrender, his voice cracked. The humans didn't negotiate. They didn't retreat. Within one planetary rotation, this was all that remained. The chamber erupted in arguments, some commanders clicking in disbelief, others demanding tactical details. Vexthor waited for the noise to subside. You think you understand warfare, he continued. You think you understand violence. But humans have a capacity that our species lack. When their young are threatened, they transcend normal behavioral patterns. They ignore self-preservation. They disregard tactical doctrine. Every human, warrior or not, becomes a potential weapon. He approached Zixtal's platform, a breach of protocol that caused guards to raise their weapons. Supreme Commander, your invasion plan assumes human commanders will follow strategic logic, that their civilians will flee, that their military will protect valuable assets. But if you harm their children, none of that will apply. They will burn their own worlds to get to you. They will sacrifice fleets to destroy a single ship carrying their young. They will not stop. Zixtal's outer mandibles twitched, a sign of consideration among the Kraxan. You speak of emotional responses. We are superior beings. We use logic, not primitive instincts. Vexthor shook his head sadly. That's exactly what we thought. Our logical superiority would prevail over their emotional chaos. We were wrong. Their emotion doesn't weaken their logic, it focuses it. It turns every human into a tactical genius with a single goal, protecting their young at any cost. He prepared to leave, knowing he had said all he could. At the chamber's entrance, he turned back one final time. The humans have a saying, "Mom's strength." It refers to how their females can supposedly lift vehicles if their child is trapped underneath. We thought it was a myth, an exaggeration. We learned too late that it was a warning. The chamber remained silent as Vex Thor departed. He had done what he could. Now he could only hope the Kraxon were wiser than his people had been. As his ship broke orbit, he received word that the Kraxon War Council had convened to discuss invasion plans. He closed his inner eyes in resignation. They would learn, as his people had, that some warnings must be experienced to be believed. First strike. General Karath watched from the bridge of the Kraxon dreadnought inevitable victory as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the human colony of New Eden. The planet's blue-green surface seemed peaceful, almost inviting, a perfect target for the Empire's first demonstration of power. Planetary defenses are minimal, his tactical officer reported. 1 orbital station, 3 defense platforms, and a small patrol fleet, primitive kinetic weapons, and nuclear missiles only. Karath's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The collective's diplomat was clearly experiencing post-traumatic delusions. Look how vulnerable they are. He straightened his armored carapace. Begin the attack pattern. Remember, we want prisoners. The Supreme Commander believes humans will be more compliant with proper leverage. The Kraxon fleet moved with precision, their crystalline ships casting prismatic shadows across New Eden's atmosphere. The human defenders responded immediately, but their weapons barely scratched the Kraxon's quantum shields. On the surface, Sarah Chen was teaching her 3rd grade class when the emergency sirens began. She drilled for this with her students, but the real thing was different. 28 young faces looked up at her, frightened but trusting. "Remember our evacuation plan," she said calmly, even as her heart raced. "Buddy system, quick and quiet to the shelter." She activated her neural link to the colony's emergency network, receiving updates as she guided her students through the school's corridors. The news was bad. The orbital defense grid was already down. Colonial Marines were engaging landing craft, but they were overwhelmed. Sarah hurried her students down to the reinforced basement shelter, counting heads obsessively. Above, Karath's forces methodically dismantled the colony's defenses. "Their tactics are predictable," he commented to his command staff. "They protect population centers first, military assets second. Inefficient." A junior officer approached with a data slate. "General, we've intercepted their communications. They're evacuating non-combatants to underground shelters, mostly young and elderly." "Perfect." Karath's eyes gleamed. "Target the shelter locations. Use sonic disruptors. We want them alive." The assault teams moved efficiently, their biomechanical armor making them nearly invincible against human small arms fire. They breached shelter after shelter, using sophisticated stun weapons to subdue the occupants. Sarah heard the fighting getting closer. She had managed to keep her students quiet and relatively calm, but fear was mounting. The shelter's reinforced door shuddered under an impact. "Ms. Chen," little Amy Watson whispered, "are we going to be okay?" Before Sarah could answer, the door exploded inward. Armored figures strode through the smoke, their insectoid forms terrifying to human eyes. She stood in front of her students, knowing it was futile but unable to do anything else. "Stand aside," the lead Kraxon ordered in accented English. "We have no desire to harm educators." "Then leave," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her terror. "These children are under my protection." The Kraxon soldier simply activated his sonic weapon. Sarah felt consciousness slipping away as she fell, her last thought a prayer that someone would come for her kids. In orbit, Grath received the final reports with satisfaction. "Operation complete. Minimal casualties on either side. We have secured approximately 10,000 human juveniles and their caretakers." His communications officer interrupted. "Sir, we're detecting multiple quantum fluctuations. Something's coming through hyperspace. Probably a response fleet," Karath said dismissively. "Maintain position and prepare to broadcast our demands to human command." But what emerged wasn't a military fleet. Hundreds of civilian ships dropped into real space. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, private yachts. Their transponders identified them as human vessels from dozens of different colonies and corporations. "Sir," his tactical officer's voice wavered. They're all accelerating toward us. No evasive patterns, no weapons charge. They're just coming." Karath watched in confusion as the civilian fleet bore down on his positions. "Warn them off. They must realize their ships will be destroyed if they—" The first cargo hauler slammed into one of his cruisers at relativistic speed. The quantum shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, hadn't been calibrated for something so massive moving so fast. Both ships vanished in a blinding explosion. "Evasive action," Karath screamed, but more civilian ships were already hitting their targets. Some of his ships managed to destroy their attackers with defensive fire, but the humans didn't seem to care. For every ship they lost, another took its place. His tactical officer's voice was filled with incomprehension. "Sir, we're detecting more quantum signatures, thousands of them. And, sir, we're receiving a transmission from human command." The message was short: "Give us back our children." Karath felt something he'd never experienced before: real fear. As his sensors showed more ships arriving, he remembered the collective diplomat's warning. They will sacrifice fleets to destroy a single ship carrying their young. He had believed he was launching a simple military operation. Instead, he had just started something that would reshape galactic history. On the planet below, Sarah Chen awoke in a Kraxon holding cell, surrounded by her unconscious students. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, every human adult in settled space was preparing for war. Parents, teachers, caregivers, all with a single purpose that would soon make the Kraxon Empire understand exactly what they had provoked. Admiral Helena Reyes stood before the United Earth Council, her uniform crisp despite 3 days without sleep. The chamber was packed, not just with politicians, but with military leaders, corporate executives, and colonial representatives. Even the usually fractious Martian Independence Party had sent delegates. "The Kraxon Empire has taken 10,427 children," she began, her voice carrying across the silent chamber, "along with 892 teachers, caretakers, and medical personnel. Our initial response has cost them 12 capital ships, but they've retreated to fortified positions with their hostages." The holoscreen behind her displayed the Kraxon defensive formations. "They expect us to negotiate. They believe they understand human nature." She paused, looking across the assembled leaders. "They don't." In the third row, James Chen, Sarah's husband, and one of Earth's leading quantum physicists, gripped his armrests until his knuckles turned white. Around him sat parents, grandparents, and siblings of the taken, all called to this emergency session. "I'm not here to ask for authorization for military action," Admiral Reyes continued. "I'm here to present humanity's response plan. Operation Maternal Rage is already underway." The holoscreen shifted to show industrial complexes across human space. Every shipyard, every factory, every research lab is being converted for war production. The corporate council has already signed over control of their facilities. The Martian Independence Fleet has pledged their ships. Even the Deep Space Mining Consortium is retrofitting their entire fleet. In orbit around Mars, that retrofitting was already visible. Massive mining vessels, designed to crack asteroids, were being fitted with military-grade shields and improvised weapons. Their cargo holds, normally filled with ore, were being converted into troop carriers. "The Kraxon believe their technology is superior," Rice continued, "and by conventional metrics it is. But they've never faced an entire species operating with single-minded purpose." She gestured to James Chen. "Dr. Chen, please update the Council on Project Breakthrough." James stood, his voice steady despite his personal stake in the conflict. "We've achieved what the Kraxon thought impossible. By combining our understanding of quantum mechanics with their captured shield technology, we've developed a way to bypass their defenses. Every ship in the human fleet will be upgraded within 72 hours. In laboratories across human space, scientists and engineers worked around the clock. Many had children of their own. All of them understood the stakes. The council chamber's doors opened, and a figure walked in that made even Admiral Reyes straighten. Catherine Walsh, age 71. Retired Special Forces operator and current director of the Terran Special Operations Command. Her presence hadn't been on the agenda. Director Walsh. Council President Rodriguez acknowledged. "We didn't expect you." "Because officially, I'm not here," Walsh replied, her gray hair and grandmotherly appearance belying her legendary status. "And officially, the mission I'm about to describe doesn't exist." The holoscreen changed again, showing detailed scans of Craxon Fortress worlds. "While they focus on our fleet movements, special operations teams are already infiltrating their territory. My operators have one objective: locate and protect our children. When the main assault begins, they'll ensure no hostage is harmed in retaliation." In deep space, those teams were already moving. Stealth ships, carrying the most elite soldiers humanity had ever produced, slipped through Craxon detection grids. Many of the operators were parents themselves, their determination sharpened by personal understanding of what was at stake. "The Craxon believe they can use our children as shields," Walsh continued, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "They believe this makes them safe. They're about to learn what happens when you threaten a Special Forces operator's grandchildren." Back in the holding cells on New Eden, Sarah Chen had organized the teachers and children into shifts, maintaining routines to keep panic at bay. Their Craxon guards watched with a mixture of curiosity and confusion as she led her students through lessons, songs, and quiet games. One guard, younger than the others, finally asked her, "Why maintain education in captivity?" Sarah looked at him steadily. "Because these children need to understand that their world hasn't ended. That adults they trust are still in control. That help is coming." She turned back to her students, her voice carrying clearly to the guard. "And help is coming. Never doubt that." In orbit, the Craxon commanders were beginning to realize something was wrong. Their long-range sensors detected unusual activity throughout human space. Every ship's signature they could detect was moving with clear purpose. Industrial output had increased by 300% across all human territories. On their command bridges, Craxon officers watched with growing unease as civilian vessels were rebuilt into weapons of war. Mining lasers became capital ship cannons. Cargo haulers became troop transports. Every private vessel with faster-than-light capability was being integrated into what was becoming the largest fleet ever assembled in known space. Admiral Reyes concluded her presentation to the Council with a single stark image: the full deployment plan for Operation Maternal Rage. The Craxon violated something sacred. They believed they could use our greatest vulnerability as leverage. Instead, they've awakened our greatest strength. She looked across the chamber, meeting the eyes of parents, leaders, and warriors. Humanity has never been truly united before this moment. We've never turned every resource, every mind, every capable hand to a single purpose. Her voice hardened. "The Craxon Empire is about to learn why you never, ever threaten human children." The Council's vote was unanimous. Operation Maternal Rage was given full authorization. As the session ended, James Chen approached Admiral Reyes. "My wife," he began, "is being tracked by 3 separate special operations teams." Reyes finished. Director Walsh made sure of it personally. "Sarah's keeping those kids safe, James. Now it's our turn to get them all home." Across human space, the awakening continued. An entire species prepared for war with a single-minded focus that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of humanity forever. Supreme Commander Zixtal stood in his war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching human fleet. The massive formation defied conventional military logic. Civilian ships flew alongside warships, mining vessels beside destroyers, all moving with coordinated purpose. "They've committed everything," his strategic advisor reported, mandibles clicking nervously. "Every ship capable of faster-than-light travel. They've left their territories completely undefended." "Madness," Zixtal muttered, but remembered Vex Thor's warning. Their emotion doesn't weaken their logic, it focuses it. The first wave hit their outer defense grid like a tsunami. Converted mining ships led the charge, their reinforced hulls designed to withstand asteroid collisions now serving as battering rams. Behind them came the warships, using the chaos to slip through gaps in the Craxon formation. Aboard the human flagship Parental Guidance, Admiral Rice watched the battle unfold. "Status on Operation Cradle?" she asked. Her tactical officer, a father of 3, responded instantly. "Special operations teams are in position near all known holding facilities. They're waiting for the signal." The Craxon defenders found themselves facing an enemy that didn't behave according to any known military doctrine. Human ships ignored catastrophic damage, continuing their attacks even while breaking apart. Civilian vessels performed maneuvers that should have been impossible, their crews pushing their modified ships beyond all safety limits. In his cell block command center, the young Craxon guard who had spoken with Sarah Chen watched the battle data with growing horror. "They're not even trying to survive," he said to his superior. "Every ship that gets destroyed takes at least one of ours with it." His superior's response was cut off by a power fluctuation. The lights flickered, then died, replaced by emergency lighting. In the holding cells, Sarah Chen heard the change in the ambient hum and smiled. She gathered her students closer, speaking softly. "Remember what we practiced. When the lights go out completely, everyone stays quiet and follows their assigned teacher." Throughout the Craxon fortress, similar scenes played out. Guards rushed to respond to multiple system failures, not realizing that each malfunction was precisely planned. In the darkness between emergency lights, shadows moved with practiced efficiency. Director Walsh, despite her age, led one of the extraction teams personally. Her operators moved like ghosts through the fortress, their advanced stealth technology supplemented by weeks of studying Craxon patterns and architecture. The guard never saw the human operators. One moment he was watching the security feeds, the next he was unconscious. Sarah Chen heard the cell door open and recognized the distinctive sound of human boots on metal. "Miss Chen," a voice whispered. "Director Walsh sends her regards. Time to go home." Across the fortress, similar scenes played out with synchronized precision. Teams of operators secured children and caretakers, moving them through pre-planned routes to waiting stealth ships. The Craxon, focused on the massive fleet battle above, never noticed their hostages vanishing from right under their mandibles. Supreme Commander Zixtal received the report of the missing hostages too late. "Find them," he raged. "They must be here somewhere. They're our only leverage." But leverage was no longer relevant. With the children secured, Admiral Rice gave the order the human fleet had been waiting for. "Operation Consequence is now active. Show them what happens when you threaten our children." The human fleet's formation changed. Ships that had been holding back surged forward, revealing weapons that shouldn't have existed. James Chen's breakthrough had done more than just counter Craxon shields. It had turned their own technology against them. Quantum fields collapsed. Defensive lines shattered. The full fury of a unified humanity crashed into the Craxon Empire like an avalanche, unstoppable and absolute. In his war room, Zixtal watched his empire crumble. Fortress worlds fell one after another. The humans weren't just winning. They were systematically dismantling everything the Craxon had built. Each world that had held human children received special attention, its military infrastructure not just destroyed but erased. "We must surrender," his advisors pleaded, "before they eliminate our species entirely." But Zixtal knew surrender might not be enough. He remembered Vex Thor's words, "They will not stop." On the Parental Guidance, Sarah Chen and her students were reunited with their families. James held his wife tightly as their students were embraced by crying parents. Similar scenes played out across the fleet as rescue ships returned with their precious cargo. Admiral Rice watched the reunions on her screens, but her expression remained stern. The rescue was complete, but humanity's message to the galaxy wasn't finished yet. The The Craxum Empire needed to become an example, a warning to any species that might consider similar actions in the future. "Continue the advance," she ordered. "Let's make sure this never happens again." The human fleet pressed forward, its purpose now transformed from rescue to retribution. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. 5 years after the Craxun War, the Galactic Council convened for a historic session. The massive chamber, usually segregated by species, showed a new seating arrangement. Former enemies sat together, their differences diminished by a shared understanding of how the galaxy had changed. Ambassador Vexthor, now serving as chief mediator for interspecies relations, stood at the podium. Before him sat representatives from every spacefaring civilization, including the drastically reformed Craxon Protectorate. Their once mighty empire now existed under human oversight, their military disbanded, their society restructured. "We gather today to ratify the Children's Protection Accord," Vexthor began, "a document that will ensure the events of the Craxun War never repeat themselves." In the human section, Sarah Chen sat beside Admiral Reyes, both now serving on the Interspecies Education Committee. The past 5 years had transformed Sarah from a colonial teacher into one of humanity's most important cultural ambassadors, helping other species understand the human concept of childhood. "The Accord establishes universal protocols," Vexthor continued. "No species, regardless of their own reproductive methods, may target, threaten, or endanger the young of any other species. The consequences," he paused, mandibles flickering. "The consequences have been demonstrated." The chamber's displays showed images of the former Craxun Empire. Where fortress worlds once stood, education centers now operated, teaching the new generation of Craxun youth alongside children from other species. The program had been Sarah's idea: integration and understanding starting with the youngest. Karath, the former general who had led the initial attack on New Eden, now worked as an instructor in one of these centers. His punishment, decided by a human tribunal, had been to understand what he had nearly destroyed. Years of working with children from various species had transformed him more effectively than any prison could have. "But this accord is more than just a law," Vexthor continued. "It represents an evolutionary step for our galactic community. We are learning from humanity that the protection of the young is not a weakness to be exploited, but a strength to be embraced." In orbit above New Eden, now a thriving multi-species colony, the maternal guidance had been converted into a museum. Its weapons replaced with educational exhibits, it served as both a reminder and a warning. School groups from across the galaxy toured its halls, learning about the war that had changed everything. Director Walsh, now in her late 70s, still conducted training sessions for the newly formed Galactic Youth Protection Force. "The best victory," she would tell her multi-species classes, "is the one that prevents the next war." The human response to the Craxun aggression was not just about revenge. Vexthor explained to the council. It was about establishing an absolute principle, that the safety of children, of any species, is paramount. James Chen, who had continued his research into quantum physics, had made another breakthrough. The technology that had helped win the war had been adapted for peaceful purposes, creating new methods of protecting and nurturing the young. Quantum shields now powered educational simulators and medical devices. "We learned that humanity's protective instinct is not unique," Vexthor said. "It existed in all of us, merely waiting to be recognized. The humans simply showed us its true power." In the chambers below, a new generation played together in the Council's Child Care Center. Young humans, Craxun larvae, collective offspring, and children from dozens of other species shared games and lessons, their natural differences forgotten in the universal language of play. Sarah watched through the observation window, remembering those dark days in the holding cell. "They never understood," she said softly to Admiral Reyes. "Protection of the young isn't just an instinct or a duty. It's what makes us civilized." Reyes nodded. "And now they understand. Not just the Craxun, but every species in known space." The final vote on the accord was unanimous. As celebration broke out across the chamber, Vexthor approached Sarah. "Your students from the war," he said. "What became of them?" Sarah smiled. "Most of them are teachers now. Some work in diplomatic services. One is designing the next generation of exploration vessels." Her expression grew serious. "But all of them understand what their experience taught us, that protecting the future means protecting all children, regardless of species." Above the council chamber, a new monument had been erected. It showed hands, tentacles, and appendages from various species joined together, supporting a universal symbol for youth. Below it, inscribed in every known language, were the words that had reshaped galactic society. "Through their children, civilizations learn to grow. Through our protection of them, we learn to be civilized. Never again." As the council session ended, Sarah prepared for her next class, a group of mixed-species children learning about cultural exchange. The galaxy had changed, she reflected, but some things remained constant. The sound of young voices learning, playing, growing. And now, thanks to humanity's response to the Kraxon War, those sounds were protected by every spacefaring species in known space. In the end, humanity's greatest victory hadn't been defeating the Kraxon Empire. It had been teaching the galaxy why they had to.